Welcome to Stuff You Missed in History Class, a production of iHeartRadio. Hello and happy Friday. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Tracy V. Wilson.
We talked all about... I won't even say all about. We talked about actuarial science and assurance and insurance all week long.
Yeah. We didn't touch at all on a type of insurance. The type of insurance that I actually have the most experience filing claims and dealing with terrifying possible claim denial in.
Health insurance.
No, homeowners insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Because most of my health insurance, there have been times that I was like, I thought this was going to be covered more, but most of that has just been filed on my behalf at the doctor, not something that I've had to personally do.
Yeah.
But I had a very scary homeowners insurance claim thing many years ago that I had to totally deal with myself. And we didn't talk about homeowners insurance at all.
No. That's no.
No.
That's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
homeowners insurance, health insurance. I mean, you can insure almost anything at this point.
right.
But it's, we would still be talking. We would be recording for 17 hours. That's
Right.
a cool podcast for someone else to launch.
Yeah.
And all they do is, I'm sure there's one out there that talks about nothing but insurance.
Something that has come up on the show before that we didn't talk about this week was, I guess we alluded to it when we talked a little bit about COVID, but medical knowledge that has come about from actuarial science.
Yeah.
Came up when we talked about hypertension and making connections between blood pressure and life expectancy. A lot of that came from actuarial tables.
Yeah, I mean, it got me thinking when you mentioned it earlier before we were recording about whether or not the rise of the smartwatch has similarly impacted actuarial science. Because, there are those occasional news stories where you'll be like, someone's smartwatch recognized that they had a heart problem before their doctor diagnosed them. And I'm like, are they then adding another finesse layer of information to the whole morass of numbers? But also that gets into a secondary thing of like, how do you know they're all the same accuracy?
I was thinking that gets into a thing of like privacy and data security.
Right.
Too.
Right. I feel like, so anytime I'm thinking about actuarial science, I'm thinking about The Player.
Mm-hmm.
Which most people will know from the movie, directed by Robert Altman, starring Tim Robbins, which is spectacular in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I'm thinking about is the book, The Player, which was written by Michael Tolkien.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this, have you ever read that book?
Mm-mm.
I love it. There is a section in the book where the character that is played by Tim Robbins in the movie has had this interaction with his secretary. And it's like a thing where they're just having a call transferred through to him on his phone. And he has this sort of hilarious moment where he's looking at his phone and the many buttons that offer different lines on his phone. And he's thinking about all of the different kinds of scientific and engineering developments that had to get to a point where someone on the other side of the world can call you and you can be connected to them, and there can be sub-connections that are done even within your office, and someone transfers that call, blah, 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 blah. And he kind of says, I'm going to misquote it because I didn't look up the exact quote, but he says, I don't know a way to describe all of this without it just coming out as, wow, phones. I'm like, that is exactly how I feel about actuarial science.
Yeah.
So this was in a way me trying to sort through that, because I will say I don't think I could keep all of the factors that go into a simple actuarial computation, certainly in my head, but even on paper, I would have trouble, I think, parsing all of it in a way that I was not like, wow, phones. So my hat's off to you if you're an actuary, or if you work in this field in any way.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, it's not great, in my opinion, that so much of this is just like, it's rooted in capitalism and companies wanting to make a profit, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like, people need a way to be able to pay for their burials.
Right.
And because that's really expensive. And people might be able to pay an insurance premium, but not be able to, like, save up the amount of money that it requires in the United States. Same thing with, making sure people's family members are not left destitute when someone dies. Like, all of this, I sort of like to envision a society where none of these are things that that companies are making money off of doing, but that would be an entire revisioning of how our entire society works.
Yeah.
This also, I kept thinking about the very, very brief and very early appearance of insurance in Terry Pratchett's Discworld books.
I'm trying to remember.
Right. So unless I am misremembering, because there are books that are sort of about, like, when the clacks system, which was sort of the early version of a telephone and telegraph system, is, like, invented in Ankh-Morpork. Like, there's whole books that sort of explore, the post office, things like that. And I don't think there's a book that's specifically like insurance, but at the very, very, very beginning of that series, Two Flower, a tourist, and also, if I'm remembering correctly, an insurance agent. And this is like a sort of a side part of one of the earliest books of that series. But I kept thinking about it because they say it in sewer ants. In sewer ants is how they say it. And it's, I don't know. I just kept thinking about it every time the word insurance came up in this episode.
We could re-record the whole thing and say insurance every
the whole time.
Just see how many people lose their minds and get really frustrated with us. One of the kinds of insurance that we did not talk about, which fascinates me utterly, was popular in, I think, the 18th and early 19th century, which was called leases for lives. And basically at that point, I was thinking, like, why would this even be a thing? And then I realized, like, because your home was the most important thing at that point in terms of your financial stability. And basically, like, a person could pay a lump sum to lease a piece of land, and a home, and it would mean that they could keep that the rest of their life. Okay. And in a lot of those policies, it also meant that, like, the next 2 generations of their family could. So they were like, it was a form of insurance so that their family would always have a place to live. And I'm like, this is fascinating.
So when was this again?
I think this was mostly in the I don't have this noted anywhere handy. Like late 17th through 18th and early 19th century, maybe.
It reminds me a little bit of something that we talked about in the Rebecca Riots episode about how people living in rural Wales were mostly tenant farmers. And for centuries, like, their lease had generally been a whole lifetime.
Right.
And so I wonder if that's connected to.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's a wild thing to consider. I told you we would mention a thing about the eccentric Edwin Roe Morse.
Oh, right. Yes.
Because we talked about how there is a theory that he just plucked actuary as, like, that's an interesting word from history. I'll use that. Here's another story that I read about him that kind of illustrates what a marvelously odd duck he may have been, even though a lot of people said he was really obstinate and kind of a pain in the neck. He had a daughter who, for a lot of her early life, he would only speak to in Latin.
Oh. Okay.
That's kind of all I know about it. I don't know if she continued to use Latin throughout her life. I don't know if she was like, Dad, will you please just speak English to me? I don't know. It's an odd experiment to do, and it does show how eccentric he really was.
Well, and I know of some people who have wanted to raise their children to be bilingual,
Yes.
or more.
Oh, for sure.
And like
which is
one
great.
parent was fluent in a language, and like that parent has spoken that language with the kids exclusively or nearly exclusively. But Latin is not something most people are just conversing
Chatting in, right. Dead
in
language.
their daily lives.
So even if she knew Latin, learned Latin to the point where she could speak it, she could probably only speak to him and a couple other people at that point.
Yeah.
Like, it's an odd limiter. Again, fascinating. I mean, I know people that, wasn't it, I think Shonda Rhimes said in an interview that she only let her kids watch Netflix with the French dubs on.
Wow.
But I could be misremembering, so don't anybody get mad at me if that's wrong. But I swear I saw that somewhere. And I have known other parents who have done similar things where they're like this, but it's usually much more granular. Like this one cartoon we only watch in Spanish or whatever.
Sure.
Because they know their kid loves that cartoon and like they'll rewatch it over and over and it'll be a good learning thing. But listen, I was fairly multilingual when I was tiny. I lost most of it. I wish I had maintained it.
Yeah. We've talked about that.
Yeah, it sucks. I'm still like on Duolingo going, I don't remember if that's a masculine or feminine noun. Here's another interesting thing.
Okay.
This is a personally interesting thing, but also just delighted me because there's a name of a place that is delightful. So,
okay.
When I was in London in April for Star Wars Celebration, and we went a little early so we could kick around and celebrate my husband's birthday. One of our friends who lives just outside the city had recommended this particular pub to us, and the name delighted me. And then when I was doing this research, I found out that the Amicable Society for a Perpetual Assurance Office, if you wanted to become a member, you had to go to this same place to inquire, and the name of that pub is the Cheshire Cheese.
Okay.
And it still exists. Although my understanding is that the pub has moved a couple times, but I wish I had known. It's there in Fleet Street, and I wish I had known when I was in London that I was at the place where you could join one of the earliest assurance society.
That's a great name for a pub.
It is a great name for a pub. I feel like I need to go back to London anyway, because that was the first time I had been in many decades. Certainly the first time I had been as what I would categorize as a more or less functional adult. And I just felt like I didn't have enough time, and we did stuff, but I feel like we couldn't ever have done enough stuff. And then when it was time to like prep for the convention I was there for, I had some kind of worky engagements that I had to be preparing for, so I couldn't be running around as much. And now I'm like, I should have added another week to that trip so I could just go visit all of the fabulous historical pubs. A historical pub crawl sounds great to me. And the good thing about London is that they're everywhere still. You could take up days doing nothing but that. They might get tired of your American obnoxious pub crawl, but maybe. We hope not. We try to be respectful. Yeah. Wow. Phones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope other people find this stuff as fascinating as I do, because it is, to me, super interesting to consider where the things we just take for granted and as part of our everyday necessities, like, oh, I got to deal with insurance. Well, yes, but someone had to come up with it.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me, hopefully to others as well. I hope you don't have to deal with yucky insurance stuff this weekend, and that you have some time off.
Having had some really yucky insurance stuff in my life, man, I hope that's not befalling anybody right now.
No, I hope it befalls nobody ever, but I know that's not a hope that can be fulfilled.
It's not the world we live in, unfortunately.
No. But I do hope whatever is going on with your weekend goes as smoothly as possible and you get some fun in, whether you are booked up with obligations or work, or if you have some time to yourself. I just hope you get some fun and delight, because we all need more of it. We will be right back here tomorrow with a classic episode, and then on Monday we'll have something brand new.
Stuff You Missed in History Class is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.